All right, it's me again, Mr. Jackson, the bug guy, and this time we're not talking about bugs. We're going to talk about the world of fish. And I know a lot of you probably have a pet goldfish or some type of a pet fish at home, but kind of makes a lousy pet because you don't get to pet it very often, right? But we're going to talk about some different types of fish that live right here in Southern Oregon, and we're going to learn all about fish. Pretty cool animals too. Now, you know, fish are amazing because they have the ability to live underwater and they can breathe air out of the water, which is something that you and I can't do. Don't try it at home, okay? But that's one of the big reasons why fish are amazing, because they do have the ability to breathe air out of the water. And the reason they can do that is because of something called gills. And the gills are right here behind the head of the fish. And the gills of the fish, they actually pull the oxygen out of the water that the fish is in. That's how the fish is able to breathe underwater, which is a really amazing trick. The first fish here, this is called a largemouth bass. And he's called a largemouth bass because of the fact he's got a really large mouth. And they will eat anything, doesn't matter what it is. They will eat small mammals, they will eat other fish, they will eat reptiles, amphibians, even birds sometime too. So that's a pretty common type of fish that you can find all over Southern Oregon. They only live in fresh water. They don't live in the ocean, they live in lakes and ponds and streams. That's our friend the bass. Another pretty common fish, this is one that you find all over Oregon also. It's called the rainbow trout. And the reason it's called rainbow is because of that beautiful coloring going down the sides there. If you have ever been to a local fish hatchery, this is the type of fish that is raised at the fish hatcheries, and then the people that work at the fish hatcheries, they release them into the creeks, rivers, streams, ponds, so you and I can go fishing, and then we wind up eating the delicious rainbow trout too. Very delicious eating fish. But another type of fish that you find in local waterways, this is called a crappie, but it could also be called a pumpkin seed or a panfish. And they call them panfish because when you capture them, they fit inside of a frying pan. You fry them up and eat them. But this is a cousin to a goldfish. It's a cousin to a carp. And if you've ever been fishing for a crappie, once they latch into your hook, they go in all directions, all at the same time. And they make you feel like you just caught a whale because they pull your line all the way down in the water. But it's a really bony fish too. You can't take a mouthful of crappie meat without getting a bunch of bones in your mouth too. But they're good eating fish and good fighting fish also. Another type of fish that you might find in maybe the Columbia River or certainly at a fish hatchery too. Now this is a big fish. My model is not very big, but this is called a green sturgeon. And usually a green sturgeon can be anywhere from about 10 to 15 feet long. 15 feet is about the length of your mom or dad's car or truck. So that's a really big fish. And usually the body, it's about that big around. And it's a very old, very prehistoric type of fish because it's got these big bony ridges coming out of the backbone right here. But you see these things sticking out of his face. Some people call them whiskers, but they're actually called barbels. And this is a very ancient fish. It dates back to way before the dinosaurs ever showed up on Earth. It's called the green sturgeon. Amazing fish too. But the sturgeon has got a cousin, and it's a cousin because he's got the same whiskers or barbels sticking out of his mouth. This is called the catfish. And you find catfish all over Oregon. A lot of lakes and ponds have catfish in them. And the reason for the whiskers on the front of his face, if he's underwater and he sticks his head into a hole, the whiskers, they brush up on the inside of the hole, and then the body of the fish will know that the body is too big to fit into that hole, so usually he will turn around and put his booty back into the hole instead, and then his head is sticking out of the hole. But this is a very bony fish too. You can't take a mouth of catfish meat without getting a bunch of bones in your mouth too. But again, the catfish, it's a cousin to the green sturgeon because it has the same whiskers or barbels coming out of his face. Another type of fish you find in Oregon, out in the ocean, this is an ocean-going fish. It's our friend the shark. And we do have a lot of sharks off the Oregon coast. And a lot of people forget that a shark is a fish, but it is a fish because it is cold-blooded, like fish are. It has fins, like fish do. And most importantly, it lays eggs when a mama shark has babies. All fish lay eggs in order to have baby fish, and a shark is no different. But a shark is a type of fish that might occasionally take a bite out of you, right? So you got to watch out for the sharks too. But another fish that you find out in the open ocean, and this is certainly a weird looking fish. If you look at this guy, you'll notice he's got two eyes on one side of his head. Isn't that weird? This is called a flounder. It could also be called a halibut. And it's a bottom-feeding fish. It lays on the mud on the bottom of the ocean floor for a living. And if you lay in the mud all of your life and you have one eye on each side of your head, that means that one of your eyes is always going to be stuck in the mud, right? So as this fish gets bigger, one of its eyes moves to the other side of its head. So by the time it's fully grown, it's got two peepers on one side of its head. But the really weird thing about the halibut or the flounder, it has the ability to change the coloring on its body. It's kind of like a chameleon lizard. So if he's laying in a white patch of sand, it doesn't make any sense at all for the halibut to stay dark brown. He can change his body colorings to match his surroundings. It's called camouflage. It's a pretty good trick too. Some of the halibut, some of the flounder that they capture off the Oregon coast, they are bigger in diameter than a card table. So they get really big fish too. Good tasting fish too. Another one that you find off the Oregon coast, he looks like that. And this is our friend, a lot of people call it a stingray, but if you go to the tropics, if you go to Hawaii, Australia, he's got a big cousin. It's called a stingray because it's got a poisonous barb that comes out of the tail. But the little guy that lives off the Oregon coast, this is called a skate. It's kind of like a roller skate. And it is a fish because it's cold-blooded like fish are. It does have gills like fish do. And it does have fins like fish do. And this is a type of fish that, to me, it kind of looks like a baby elephant. Looks like he's raising his trunk, right? But this is our friend the skate. Very common type of fish that you find off the Oregon coast. And then another type of fish, and believe it or not, these two fish are exactly the same type of fish. And I wish I had two models that look the same size, but I don't. But out in the open ocean, the mom and dad, they look like this. It's called a coho salmon. And when they get the call from Mother Nature to go back home and make babies, the mama salmon, she looks like this, but the daddy salmon, he turns color. He remains the same size, but he changes color, blood red, his jaw turns into a big claw on top, and now it's not called a coho anymore. Now it's called the sockeyed salmon. And salmon are a type of fish in Oregon. They can live out in the ocean, but they can also live in fresh water back in the creeks and streams. So it's an amazing type of fish. And then the last one on the board here, this is a type of fish, if you've ever been fishing with mom and dad, it's a cute little species of trout. It's called a brook trout. And they don't get a whole lot bigger than that. But the important job that the brook trout play in the world, their bodies are very, very sensitive to poisons or any type of contamination in a body of water. So anytime something goes wrong with a body of water, if there's poison or some type of an algae that blooms, they're always the first type of animal that dies. And that's a good thing because then the scientists, they can step in and they notice that the fish is dead and they can figure out what's wrong with that body of water and they can hopefully correct the situation. So the brook trout, their important job in the world is to signal danger for all the other animals that live in a pond or a lake. Brook trout are pretty important too. So that's it for our local species of fish. Hope you learned something. I'll see you again soon.